I'm Christian Chiller. Welcome to my podcast, an enthusiastic ramble through whatever has taken my interest the past week or so. Expect technology, games, history, travel, geekery, and as always, much, much more. Welcome to Chinchilla Squeaks News, another roundup of some interesting links and things I've been up to in between interview shows with me, Christian Chiller. As always, you can find out more about me at christianchiller.com. You can also find details of, I actually release this podcast as 3 text versions as well on LinkedIn, on Medium, and on Substack. So if that's your thing, you can also head on over and read those there. More details on my website, of course. Before I get stuck into the links this week, let me just talk to you about Magic Mind, a little bottle of green liquid that aims to help you with focus, with sleep, with concentration, with a great number of things. I am getting to the end of the little box that was sent to me, and yeah, it's been working pretty well, actually. It's been a very busy few weeks. Probably these 2 weeks at the moment are some of the busiest of the year, just before the August slowdown. I'm working on a theatre show. I have a games convention. I have rehearsals for the theatre show. All sorts of things happening. So it's quite hard keeping those energy levels up, and it has been helping me quite a lot, keeping me going, keeping my focus and concentration, keeping my energy levels going through this period. If you are interested in trying it yourself and seeing how well it works for you, well, I have a link for you. You can head on over to magicmind.com/chinchillasqueaks. That's the name of the podcast. And you can use the code chinchillasqueaks20, that's the number 20, and no spaces, at checkout, 48% off subscriptions and 20% off one-time purchases. And I'd love to hear how you go with Magic Mind too. All right, we cannot have a tech news roundup without something about artificial intelligence, of course, but I'm going to pick 2 articles that dig a little bit into cracking open what's going on. The first is from Carl Orland on Ars Technica, the telltale word that could identify generative AI text. I noticed this a lot, to be honest with you. It tends to use very overly verbose, overly verbed and adverbed. I can't quite think how to say that. It shows you I am a human. Text, over the top. And to be honest with you, when you read a lot of blog posts on the internet, you kind of see why. If you read some of the training material, I am a fussy writer and reader, and there is a lot of content out there that is stuffed with words that are not necessary. So unsurprisingly, the content that these LLMs put out is going to be very similar. And it mentions, this was specifically looking at some scientific writing, which is kind of crazy to think that even in academic, traditionally dry, sort of focused scientific writing, that there were just as many examples of this. And even more interesting, this was looking at 14 million paper abstracts published between 2010 and 2024, tracking the frequency of each word. So, for example, we'd use words like delve, showcasing, underscore, findings, crucial. Yeah. And you could really see these charts. Some drop off again. It could be that the models get better. Hard to see. But they also compared these with other events from the time, like looking for words like pandemic, for example, that obviously ramps up very quickly and then drops off a little bit. So here is a classic example. A comprehensive grasp of the intricate interplay between is pivotal for effective therapeutic strategies. I mean, I kind of feel like a lot of academic work tends to use words like this even before LLMs. But again, this feeds the machine, as it were. The closing paragraph is kind of interesting, actually. Before long, we may need to call in some Blade Runners to pick out the text hiding in our midst. Or text runners? Blade readers? I'm not sure. And in related, this is from Donald Papp on Hackaday. Peering into the black box of large language models. It's quite surprising how many models, their creators don't really, well, they know how they work, but we don't really understand what's happening inside them, the individual transactions, the individual decisions going on. And now this is starting to change. Anthropic have recently shared the mapping of the mind, they call it, of Claude 3.0 Sonnet by finding a way to match patterns of neuron activations. It sounds very much like they are using a little bit too much human-like words here, but still. And you can see this breakdown of how it goes through a thought process. So I can see a very interesting example here. When someone responds, "I'm fine," or gives a positive but insincere response when asked how they are doing. This is a marker. These sorts of things, which is kind of interesting. I mean, it's the only one so far, I think, but it's good to see. I think a lot of these researchers and the companies even behind these want to know how the things they are making work so they can optimize and test for them. It's not just people who are interested and want to kind of pick apart and analyze and understand and maybe be informed to make complaints against these tools. The researchers, the people who make them, also kind of want to have an idea of how they can be improved. And if you don't really understand how a system is working, it's hard to improve it after a certain point. So it's interesting to see that many researchers are starting to find ways of actually seeing the decision tree that goes behind many of the tools they are making. Changing tack a little bit. I feel like I said the same thing last time and couldn't actually remember what the right phrase was, but I'm just going to stick to what comes first. This is on Wired from Natasha Bernal and Isabel Fraser. Keir Starmer, how Keir Starmer, the new Prime Minister of the UK, can fix the UK's tech industry. The tech industry in the UK is already fairly large. My partner actually works for a European tech publication, and she's done this for a little while. And often the UK is still one of the countries in Europe that has the biggest funding rounds, some of the higher profile startups, et cetera, et cetera. It's also one of the bigger countries, so this can obviously help. And the language and cultural connection to the US can help a little bit, I suppose, as well. But with a change of government comes an opportunity to call new shots, to start fresh and look at policies and protocols and regulations, or remove them, of course, that may help people in tech and startup businesses. It doesn't really solve the problem of talent. This is still something that is made a little harder with the exiting from the European Union, although there have been some whispers around what's happening here. And despite a lot of these problems, the article lists that the UK tech sector is still in quite good shape. 50 unicorns, companies valued over $1 billion, that is, and the third most valuable in the world after the US and China. So it's pretty good. But in 2023, this declined. I mean, you could argue that it declined everywhere, though. And the Labour government is being called to improve investment opportunities and maybe change some of the funding opportunities. There's a lot of things that governments do in some countries to allow for reinvestment of pension funds and this kind of thing. We could argue whether these are good ideas or not, but they are possibilities there. And of course, I've spoken, and I think it was only a couple of episodes ago, with Open UK, and they have their perspectives. They actually put out some papers as well since the new government that you can take a look at that feeds very much into this current discussion. So we'll see, I suppose. The UK economy in general is not in the best shape. It's an interesting time to maybe look at opportunities to reform that, to do new things, to have a bit of a shake-up. And yeah, they are talking about changing some visa requirements, reinvesting into clean energy funds, dropping immigration surcharges, and all sorts of things to help open the doors to skilled workers, I suppose. And as always, we will see, I suppose. And finally, I always love a bit of technology history. And this is the 45th birthday, although that would imply it's still alive. Anyway, the 45th birthday of the Sony Walkman, covered over on Music Radar by Will Simpson. I had a very depressing conversation with a 22, 23-year-old a few months ago about ripping and burning CDs, and he had no idea what I was talking about. I think the concept of a Walkman would disturb them so much that they would think I was talking. Who knows? I imagine I had a very vivid imagination, maybe. But yeah, used to make mixtapes, used to have to connect tape recorders together to get this terrible sound quality that invariably would cut a song off halfway because you ran out of tape on one side and had to turn it over in hope that the tape hadn't been chewed or hadn't been demagnetized and all sorts of things. Anyway, Sony only stopped making them in 2010, so that gave it about 30 odd years, I suppose. And now they're going up on eBay, of course. In 2021, nearly 250,000 were sold in the UK. And a lot of bands are putting out tapes again. There's even a couple of subgenres in the role-playing space. There's a sort of subgenre of playing old-style role-play games. This has some other discussions that we'll talk about another time. And often the games are released with a soundtrack on cassette tape, and the scenario is on like the inlay of the tape. And there's a store here actually that stocks a lot of these and has a tape deck, and we went through them. And again, I was reminded how often you have to get up to change the music. But yeah, memories, eh? I did have one. I can't really remember who made it, so if it was Sony or maybe Panasonic. I don't know. But yes, happy birthday, happy anniversary of creation. I'm not completely sure. Sony Walkman, long may you, well, to be honest with you, I'm okay with that Walkmans and cassettes, but for those of you who care, long may they last. And finally, a few updates from me. I don't have any masses of new content to tell you about. I have a new flash fiction and music combination on my TikTok. I will also put that out to Instagram soon. I'm not putting those out to YouTube at the moment because the format doesn't really work on YouTube for their various size and time restrictions, but it is on TikTok and will be on Instagram soon. One of my flash fiction readings with some new music made by me and collaborator James Harding, who I work with quite a lot. And I'm working on some article versions of some of my recent videos, and I'm putting the finishing touches on a video looking at game emulation options for macOS. I've been working on a lot of very long videos, so it's coming together. When this episode comes out, I will be at We Are Developers in Berlin. If you happen to be listening to this episode during that, then try and find me. And after that, I will be at Euroku in Sarajevo later in September. That's the next event from me, followed by hopefully attending Shift just after that, just the week after in Croatia, actually. So those will be the next two events. If you don't get me in time for We Are Developers, that'll do for now. I will have some more updates soon, but I'm still working on some things. So I have been Christian Schiller. You can always find out more about me at christianschiller.com. You can also find ways to give your feedback. Leave a comment, leave a review. Highly appreciated. And you can find out various ways to support me on the support page of my website too. So thank you very much for joining me, and take care, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. Find out more about me at christianschiller.com, where you can find show notes, sign up for my newsletter, and find all of my writing, games, work, and video links. There's also details on how to get in touch with me. And if you want to get even closer to what I do, join my Discord server for behind-the-scenes discussions and helping me produce my shows and work.